It's been about 4 days since I traveled to France for my first time, and in this video I want to share some of the things that I learned traveling to France, because not only was it my first time, I also didn't do a lot of research about traveling over there and had to figure some things out on my own. So in case some of you plan to go over there, hopefully some of the things that I share in this video will help you prepare. My wife and I stopped for groceries on the way up to the hotel when we got there. And one thing that I learned was you have to bring your own bags for groceries. We got up to the front and they did not have any bags. And so we had to walk to the car carrying all of our individual grocery items that we purchased. So these people in the parking lot were probably thinking, these silly Americans not bringing their own bags. So make sure you have bags when you go to a grocery store. Also, you have to weigh your produce back in the back, print out these little stickers. They don't weigh it up front. So in America, you know, they weigh all your produce up front and then give you a price. You have to print out the price in the back. So a little thing about groceries there. Speaking of buying things, so we actually never exchanged currency when we were there. I had planned to do it in the airport. I was so excited about landing and getting there. We forgot to exchange currency. It actually turned out to be okay for the most part. We tried to stop and exchange at a bank. They didn't do it. There's only a few places that I noticed that you could exchange. I should have done it at the airport. I've heard it's a little more expensive at the airport, but it's probably more convenient. The only time we ran into problems of not being able to use a credit card, and by the way, I used our Visa card for the whole trip. I tried to use American Express the first time. They didn't take it, so I just ended up using my Visa card. The only time we ran into problems is they don't add tip at a restaurant with a credit card. So in America, you know, they ring the card through, then you write in your tip amount and they add it and ring it up again. In France, they don't do that. You cannot tip on a credit card. I felt horrible. There was about 2 or 3 restaurants where I literally couldn't leave a tip because I didn't have any currency. So I would definitely exchange currency. But the good thing is you can use credit card over there for almost anything. As far as the French language, I was actually surprised at how few people I heard speaking American. You know, there were 7,500 people in the race that I did. I don't think I heard anybody from America. I heard some Brits so I could understand what they were saying. But for the most part, I would say 98% of the people were speaking a different language. There was only a few places we went to where the people did not speak English at all. Now at the airport, the subtitles were in English. Every once in a while, we'd run into a menu that had some subtitles in English, but for the most part, they did not. I did use Google Translate, and it worked well as far as being able to type in phrases or words. I was not able to get it to work well by the conversation. So with Google Translate, you can talk, and it'll speak it in French, and they can speak, and it'll speak it in English. I never could get it to work right. I think part of it was the internet connection. The cell service, which I'll talk about in a minute, was not great. It kept kind of dropping out here and there. But Google Translate does work. Now the best thing about Google Translate that I didn't know this did it, but we figured it out, was you can put it on the camera mode and go French to English, and you can hold the phone up and it'll turn the words in the camera to English and in the same font and color as what's on a menu or a sign or whatever. And that turned out to be great. And so that's probably the thing that we use Google Translate for the most. All right, speaking of the hotels that we stayed in, so our first hotel was on the top of Alpe d'Huez, and I've heard that the rooms in Europe are smaller. I didn't expect them to be this small. There was just enough room in our hotel for the 2 beds, our luggage, and a bicycle. To walk around the beds, between the beds and the TV, I had to turn sideways. The second hotel that we stayed in was very inexpensive, but it had common bathrooms and showers. We didn't mind. It was an adventure. We were only there for 2 nights. But it was very clean. It was a very clean hotel. But before we went, I bought a European plug adapter on Amazon, and I'm so glad that I did. That's one of the few tips that I got before going over there. And so you just plug it into the European plug. It had 2 USB ports and 1 regular standard American plug. That was a lifesaver. Had we not had that, we wouldn't be able to charge our phones or iPads or cameras or anything. Something that's really cool about France is the fact that everything, at least where we were more kind of in the rural area, everything was little villages instead of, you know, these big neighborhoods. Also over there, you don't see strip malls, you don't see lighted signs, you don't see billboards. When you watch the Tour de France and you see these old buildings, these little villages, that's exactly what it's like over there. Everything looks a lot more uniform. So speaking of cell service, I'm on Verizon. Before I went over there, I got this pass, and so we paid $10 per day per phone. And so it's $20 for my wife and I. And I got all the service that I get in America. Free, I get unlimited text, unlimited phone calls, all that carried over with $10 a day. And then data, we got 1.5 gigs per day with that pass, and then they throttle it back. So definitely check with your carrier before you go over there, because there's different packages that you can get. And by the way, when you call America from Europe, you have to add a plus sign and a 1 before the number. So +1 area code. Some of y'all may be watching this video and be like, dude, we know that. I didn't, and so all of my contacts that I tried to use didn't go through until I went in and added the +1 to the contacts to call out. By the way, all the hotels had Wi-Fi, pretty good Wi-Fi. And although the second hotel, there were like 3 steps I had to go through to get it to work, and I could never figure it out. There was another one downstairs in the cafe that worked just 1 step like I'm used to, and that actually, I was close enough in my room to use that network. But the good thing is, Wi-Fi's definitely available over there and works really well. So we rented a car while we were over there. Because we were going from Lyon to Alpe d'Huez, there was not a public, like train system to get up there. And so we rented a car. So I'll talk about a few things about driving that I learned. First of all, before you go over there, if you're going to drive, look on a website and figure out what the signs mean in French. So a lot of the signs I could figure out. Some of them I didn't figure out until I got back home. I was like, I'm going to look up on the web and see what these signs mean. So make sure you familiarize yourself with what the road signs mean before you drive over there. 95% of the vehicles over there are small hatchbacks. It was kind of strange to me. I just didn't expect that, but everybody drives a small hatchback. Every once in a while you'll see an Audi, SUV, but even the SUVs over there are not very big. It just seems like everything's smaller in France, which I don't mind. It's almost like they're more environmentally conscious. The gas over there is very expensive. In fact, we filled up, we only used 1/4 of a tank of gas, and to top it off was $30. And it was a diesel car that we rented. Also, almost every car over there is a manual transmission. Fortunately, I drive manual transmission. I have almost my whole life, so it was no big deal. But if you're going to rent a car, they do have automatics. They're not very common, but they do have them. So if you don't have a stick or know how to drive a stick shift, make sure you rent an automatic, because if you don't declare it, it'll most likely be a stick shift. In fact, when we were walking around town, I just looked in the windows of some of the cars and I saw 0 automatics, which actually was great when you're driving the mountains, because you can use the transmission when you're coming down the hill. I just love manual transmission. It's so much more engaging, but that's just something that you need to be aware of. Obviously, they drive on the right side of the road, so if they drove on the left side of the road and it was a stick shift, I would have been in trouble. And speaking of signs, by the way, when you're on the interstates over there, there's no, like here in America, we have, food coming up at this exit, or, all these restaurants or gas stations. They don't have that over there. So you have to use your Google Maps or Apple Maps, whatever you use, if you got to find a gas station. I didn't see a lot of gas stations, really. Fortunately, we filled up at a place kind of near the hotel. But that's another thing. And again, it goes back to everything just looking more uniform. It does not look as commercial as the United States, which I love. I mean, I knew I'd like France, but I fell in love with France when I was over there. Google Maps, by the way, works flawlessly over there. We navigated to several places using Google Maps, and it was absolutely fine. Something else, speaking of driving, is the French know how to drive around cyclists. Going up Alpe d'Huez, there were probably like hundreds and hundreds of riders coming down, and there were cars everywhere. Saw 0 accidents, 0 issues. Now, I'm sure there's incidences over there, but Here in America, if you had that many cyclists and that many cars, you probably would have had 5 accidents. The French, cycling is a part of the culture. They know how to drive around cyclists. In fact, I was so comfortable riding over there that I didn't use the mirror. I use my mirror all the time to watch traffic behind me. I used it for my first ride, like had it on the bike. When I did the Marmot Alps, I didn't even put it on the bike. I was that comfortable driving around, or riding around France with all the drivers. All right, let's talk about food. Because before I went over there, I was just almost apprehensive. I didn't know what kind of food I was going to be able to find. Man, the breakfast spreads were incredible at the hotels. The first hotel that we stayed at had breakfast and dinner, and they had I like oatmeal, so I had muesli every morning. I love muesli. And they had all kind of fruit, all kind of bread. I'm also a bread person, and if you're a bread person, you'll love France. If you're gluten intolerant, eat muesli. But the breakfast spreads were absolutely incredible. Like I said, a lot of fruit. My wife loves coffee. She said the coffee and espressos over there were just incredible. Bread's everywhere. Baguettes are everywhere. Someone told me that before I went over there. Definitely true. I eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and nuts and grains, and I had no issues at all over there. In fact, one of the guys on the Look ambassador team eats only like meat and eggs and protein, and he was able to find everything he needed too. So the last thing that I'll note here, I hope I don't offend anybody by this, it's just an observation that I made when I was over in France, and that's the fact that I saw only maybe 2 or 3 overweight people the whole trip. Now obviously I'm at an event where there's athletes and spouses of athletes, but it just seems like over there people are generally in better shape than in America. Obesity is a huge problem in America. But what you don't see definitely over there are kids that are teenagers or young 20s that are 50 to 100 pounds overweight, like we see here in America. And so that was an interesting observation that I made. Everybody seemed pretty fit. Now I was watching the tour yesterday and I noticed there were some overweight people on the side of the road. So I know there's overweight people in France. I didn't see any, which was kind of an eye-opener. In fact, when we got to the gate in Lyon to fly back to Canada, which then we flew into America, I saw 3 overweight people at the gate, and all 3 of them were Americans. And they were pretty overweight, and they were just, they were sloppy, and it was an eye-opener. I was almost a little embarrassed because people that are thin like me in America are now the exception rather than the norm. Now, fortunately, this is a cycling channel, and you're either fit or you want to be fit if you're, starting to ride bikes. So you probably get what I'm saying, but it was just, again, it was an eye-opener when I was in France. All right, so that'll wrap it up for this video. Just some tips of traveling over to France in case you're going to go over there. Also some observations that I made when I was in France. If you haven't watched them, go back and watch my Marmot Alps video, the riding, and then the follow-up to that one, which is just things that I learned about doing the event. Thanks for watching.